Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's doing reasonably well. And I have a couple of questions here from folks that have sent them in. Uh, let's see. There's a question from Todd Gregg in Toronto. Uh, and the question is around astral travel and remote viewing. And I think this whole idea of astral travel and remote viewing is part of the metaphysical orientations that have been going on for quite a long period of time all over the world. Was initially focused on I think it was Eckankar who focused on a very an interesting point of view that they thought that they could reach into a very high state by sequencing levels of um, high state operating still from the personality point of view. Um, some believe that they had some success with that. But there was, once again, difficulties relating to belief systems and ideas that relate to um, being able to perceive things that others couldn't. And so lots of competition, not only in that kind of process, but other styles and types of astral travel. Most often using the solar plexus or the emotional center through the brow as a method of engaging with higher states. Big dilemma here. And I think with the next question, it's going to be roughly about the same idea. Everybody who lives on this plane can be involved with the astral states because they're already involved with the astral states. As a personality, you contribute to the emotional, let's say, energy levels of the species. And in a kind of a way, astral, from some people's point of view, is an emotional kind of thing. From other people's point of view, it's slightly different. Some folks believe that there is an astral element in the soul level and beyond the soul level. I'm inclined to think that that might have some merit simply because the levels of engagement with higher states has to come in, if we have experiences at that level, they have to come into the level of our personalizations so that we can at least attempt to perceive them based on how we actually engage mentally, emotionally, or physically, relating directly to our particular individual personalities. It's like, how do you talk to another person, for example? You have to find some kind of common language. Even if they speak English and you speak English, sometimes it's difficult to engage with others if their interests are not exactly the same as yours might be, or they need to have some relative interest. Otherwise, you will quickly not be interested in talking to them, or if they have beliefs that are slightly different, you will have a different point of view. And then you've got to be able to talk to each other. And talking to each other sometimes is not possible because people don't want to listen to something different than what they believe. Now, that is not the case with everybody, and that's a fact, but it is an assumption that personalities make. And if you make that assumption and then uh, you engage with the person and then you feel uncomfortable because they have a different point of view, then you will find a way to terminate the discussion or not engage somehow. And you'll have a way of perceiving that. Well, it's very interesting because often it's considered that higher states might have a particular language. Various languages are there. For example, astrological languages, um, uh, pictographic languages, or just plain ordinary language. But ordinary language, to converse with the higher state with ordinary language, you would consider that many people would consider that it's only them talking to themselves. So it's complicated, very interesting. There are pictures of places in the mind where, in an astral form, for example, that you can literally see pictures in your mind that are exactly of a place where something else may be going on. There was a lot of, in North America and in Russia especially, psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain. There's one book that you might consult, not only moving objects, but moving the mind a great distance to see if they could figure out what was going on in other countries, and vice versa, of course. This was somewhat considered valuable, and then found out that it wasn't always as valuable because 2 or 3 different people would have different conclusions. Not very scientific, but nonetheless. Views that can occur, pictures that can occur, and actually, for some, it's fairly easy to get out of the body, literally, and engage with other states by thinking of another person someplace else other than where they are. And some are quite talented in this. The biggest difficulty with this is it's a link with the personality. And personality has views, biases. It's the way it works. Each and every person comes out of themselves. And the dilemma is learning how to get to the point where you don't let your biases interfere with your particular interests. Everyone has curiosities about various things, people included, and that isn't a very constructive perspective with respect to engaging around in the astral plane. Remote viewing is the same, really the basic same concept. I think Monroe was one that involved with the astral, called astral travel and remote viewing. I can't remember where that happened, but name changes occur all the time. It's basically the same thing. So the only thing that I would say about that is that attempt to handle yourself here on these planes and attempt to do the best you can with how you are on these planes and soften down your contribution to the astral or mental planes. And it will be helpful not only to others, but also to you in your engagement with attempting to gain access to higher states or some other state. Astral state is really still pretty physically focused. I know people don't like me saying that, but nonetheless, physically focused meaning your physical personality is still in charge. Dilemma with that is in higher states, and we'll talk about this in the next question. At higher states, you would interfere or interpret higher states differently than what may be given as an expression from those states if you don't soften down your biases somewhere along the line and move from exclusion of other things other than your bias to inclusion and an attempt to try to understand from different perspectives. It just opens how you see the world. But once again, not perfect. Human beings are not perfect, but even if we think we are. So this is kind of an idea about this astral travel business. I don't teach it simply because of that particular reason with the personality. And it's a difficult thing to slow our particular interests down or our biases down, but attempt to gentle them down. And you may have experiences that are automatic, that just happen, and you're wide awake in your mind and you perceive things that are really basically there to be noticed. It sounds pretty strange, but I'm trying to be pretty general with that particular question. There's another question from Sue Donahue, and she says, it's a difficult question. She says, what is the difference between religion and spirituality? Wow. If we think about that for a minute, we come face to face with at least you have an idea about what that being religious or having a religion might sound like. And very well, there's nothing wrong with that. Or being spiritual. Boy, are there ever all kinds of definitions around these two things. And both of those definitions can interlock with each other. Once again, I think it's your thinking that's important. You have to think these things through as well. If a person thinks that they can't be spiritual in a religious background, they may be missing something.
What do you mean by that?
And what I mean by that is they may be missing that sitting in a pew on a bench doesn't stop you from being spiritual. You can go into higher states anywhere you go. And being able to have extrasensory perception, knowledge about all kinds of organizations and or information that you believe is highly spiritualized doesn't make you spiritual either. But it does. They all are interests that a personality has. And if you have a belief that where you gain access to something within yourself, or you are start noticing that your personality has a whole lot of views about a whole lot of things. No offense to any of us that have a personality. Um, just because you have a personality that believes one way or the other doesn't make you spiritual either. But it can, by definition, that you have personally, be called spiritual by you, because that's the way you're thinking or feeling. Others may not agree with that, but agreement is where the difficulty is. That's the personality orientation. There are various stages of engagement with the possibility of being spiritual. And this honestly does not align with very many things. You can go to any church, have any belief, and you go there because it makes you feel better. You could call that spiritual. You could do anything that made you feel better. Walk in the woods. You could call that spiritual. And some have, and some will. You can engage any way you wish in a personality defined manner by any individual and call it spiritual. It's the nature of our allowing ourselves to decide what spirituality means. And that would include any religion for that matter. I know religions battle it out, but personalities battle out for spirit in spiritual domains as well. Not only the big five we're talking about here, it's many societies do the same thing. Many yogis do the same thing. There's always discussions and engagements with what might be true and what might not be true. And then there is another level of engagement, and that level is kind of a bond between spiritual experiences, you might call them, and beliefs. You may have a spiritual experience, and you also may have a belief, and so you tie the two of them together. Another person has a different belief, but has a spiritual experience. And you may say, yeah, but it's not like mine. It's related to that other belief. So it can't be as good as mine. Our personalities are inclined to do these kinds of things. If we can let go of some of that stuff, then maybe we can consider the possibility that there are some things all across the world that may be helpful to get us into a kind of a bond between the personality and the spiritual states, so-called. I would call that energetic perception. But it can be visuals again. Some people have actually seen angelic beings. But some other person who doesn't believe in angelic beings may say, that can't be possible because there's no such thing. For that other person that doesn't believe in that, they would have to have something that would happen in the language that they have constructed within themselves that would relate to a peak experience of some kind. For example, they may be some kind of a scientific or mathematician and found that they could not solve a particular math problem, and suddenly, out of nowhere, they have the solution in their mind for about 10 minutes. So they write it all down and then they try and make sense of it. And wow, it works. They might call that a kind of peak experience of some kind, but it relates to their belief system. And that does not devalue the personality because it has it there. It means there is an influence in the mind of an idea that was not perceived before. And 10 chances to 1 on a very base personality level, that individual would say they figured it out. In fact, they may not have figured it out at all. It may just have appeared, and they wrote it down. This is something that's well known in the arts, by the way. Not necessarily considered spiritual in any way, but definitely creative. And in writing, in painting, in sculpture, in all kinds of artistic endeavors, people have had eureka experiences that enable them to recognize that there is something beyond their personalizations. What you do with that may be sliding down the scale a bit and saying, this is mine and I did this. And in fact, nobody else was there. So I guess maybe you could actually say that, but you don't necessarily say that there was an influence of some kind there that related to some kind of experience that from time to time happens, and you don't know how it happened. But nonetheless, it's like a peak experience of some kind. There is another area in this which is quite interesting from my perspective, because in many sociological constructions that are thankfully there for many people, religions or societies of various kinds that are attempting to eke out an understanding of higher states. I'll use that terminology. But then there are some who have linked into higher states, perhaps over lifetimes, perhaps lifetimes unknown, but nonetheless it's just there. And the early beginnings of this, they begin to perceive energy that is slightly different, that is different than the energy that they are familiar with. If perhaps they are even familiar with the fact that they are an energetic being, we still go through these structures that relate to personality first, then personality engaging with itself and attempting to understand itself. Very strong personality orientations, philosophical backgrounds, that kind of thing. Very, really important, relatively speaking. Even belief systems individualized rather than generally open to all kinds of understandings. But that is along the personality setting. You set a way of needing to be, and then therefore things are like that. And you hold on to that belief. And you can have, right in there, you can have experiences that relate to what one could say different ways that are, or different perceptions that are not normalized in our communities. But there is a bonding level. They start coming together a bit, but the personality thinks it's still in charge. And then there is that other state. And this other state is very difficult, meaning you engage with this higher state, and the higher state enables you to engage with life. And you recognize that the personality is a learning form. And it's consistently learning, no matter what your name is, who you are, what you've done, no matter what it is. And we don't like thinking like that. We would prefer to be certainly at best in the mental stage where you have experiences that happen and you're great because you had that. The other option, of course, is not even recognizing those experiences as other than themselves, personality self, and anything and everything that happens is only them. And we're set up that way in our communities, generally speaking, in our species, because the intensity is so strong that relates to valuing the individual or the sociological bond, whatever it may be. I find it really interesting and very fascinating. And these bonds, by the way, have a lot to say about other bonds, other belief systems. They're either good, bad, okay, but not really as good as ours, this kind of thing. That's personality orientation. And we have them. And it's where we are. And it's not so simple to answer such a question as the difference between religion and spirituality. Because if you come up with a definition, it will sound belittling, perhaps, to others. And in fact, that's not a very reasonable rendering that relates to attempting to engage with an internal spiritual engagement, as opposed to a right, wrong, this versus that engagement. It's very fascinating that there have been many experiences over the years in almost every religious background that relate to higher states, that relates to a version of creativity that's really interesting, or a version of metaphysics, for example. People are able to do this or that or the other thing. And that is related to the physical personality. The personality seems to be in an attitude of charge. They are charged in a way that is slightly different than the common person, normal person. And that charge is used by the personality. That's fundamental. Used by the personality, first stage, as a credit to their system, to their person, their personality, their name. This is very difficult for us to overcome. And I think it's going to be even harder in the future for us to overcome, because more and more, it's possible that more and more, I should say, may be gaining access to the increase in ability that might be called metaphysical, or slightly off the physical connotation of the personality. In other words, being a little bit more psychic, whatever that might mean, and using it to engage with others in a not so constructive manner. Because first of all, we have been trained to be assessive or judgmental, so that we are not mm, taken into given a difficult time somehow. And that, by the way, has been really important for us. Also, it's got us into a lot of trouble at the same time, or versions of what might be called trouble. So you can see the difficulty here. Whereas religions can be spiritual. Spiritual people who believe in all kinds of things can also be spiritually focused. Religions would not call them necessarily very spiritual. Perhaps the metaphysical backgrounds would not call religions very spiritual either, based on histories that are honest and real as we as a species, make our way slowly through bending and moving in different directions towards attempting to engage with states that are beyond what we currently can engage with. Some of you know for sure that I've told a number of stories about meeting some individuals who would not be necessarily called um, anything but spiritual. They're energetic beings, as you and I are. But their relationship with being an energetic being is primarily for the good of others. How can they help others to grow internally to be able to reach that third stage, or at least the second stage, where they begin to realize that the personality is important on these levels, and they begin to move towards an understanding that they must learn beyond these levels and not use their abilities for the purpose of being superior to others. That's a hard pill to swallow, because each and every person attempts the best they can to survive in our world, fundamentally, to be as happy as they can, and sometimes they're not that happy, because life can be crushing sometimes, very difficult, and other times not so much. Being able to understand that is one thing. Talking about it is just another. Recognizing that that is the way life happens sometimes is not so easy. None of us do well with these things. And cultivating an understanding based on this question is also difficult, because the relationship that we all would like to have is to be involved as a oneness beyond what we can currently. Then you have the other, I just came into my mind, and even then you might have the other way of looking at things, where some folks who don't have that oneness have something other kind of way of looking at things, and that oneness would be not only criticized but demonized by others, and it would be a very sad state altogether. That is sometimes why the sages said, if you grow internally, learn how not to talk about it. After all the times you have been taught to talk about only your positive things, so that people will understand that you're really a good apple. And this is difficult for us too. And we are subtle in it. It's not negative. It's just how we have learned to be as others have been and done their best in life. By the way, societies and organizations of all different kinds try to do the same thing. And they are acting like personality forms just as much as any others. This is where it's very difficult for all of us human beings to let go of that need when if you don't have it, no one recognizes you. So there's a trick. These other folks, these able beings, walk around in our world with the hope that you will never recognize them. Boy, that is slightly off from our focus on our general focus of personality and the great need we have to be recognized and accepted in the world. It seems that you would have to have a tremendous amount of love, compassion, and perhaps will, so that you didn't engage at that level and begin to attempt to engage at a different level. This is very difficult to do for many of us. Those are the major questions that I've had sent in. As I often say, we roughly use at least a couple, maybe 2 or 3 questions each time. And I would really appreciate more questions coming in. There was another question about the whole process of loving and how difficult it is to take in this idea of a universal love that's operating in us all the time. I would agree. It's extremely difficult, very difficult to take in. But this engagement, this concept of love, it is kind of blended in our languages with a life force. Now, some would call that an internal will or internal reflex. So, taking a slight stab at it, when we are born, right in the mother's womb, we have a moving sense of awareness, a kind of sensing out. It gives us a clue as to how we are, generally speaking, in the world. We take in information energetically, one could say. The brain makes sense of it through the ears, through the eyes, taste buds, all our senses. But we're perceiving and then translating that perception through our brain and nervous system, relating it in that translation to the biases that we've constructed or have had constructed in us when we were little kids, as adults, levels of trust, levels of love, levels of anger, levels of frustration, levels of reaction, all kinds of little subtleties. And they converge and reify, and they maintain a kind of way or image that is not even seen by us, and some that are seen by us. And they express themselves based on the perceiving and the making sense of whatever it is that is available to us within ourselves, within our mind, because our emotions and our physical body, because we're constantly engaging in that manner to find purpose in our interpretation. So when we find that purposeful interpretation, we express that or hold that into our inner world And that's how we tend to engage and survive in our worlds. And the responses that we're involved with are many. And the sensing mechanisms that we have are tremendous. Not only is it involved with this form here and here and here, but we are perceiving energy. And as you begin to learn how to perceive energy more, your system that is cultivated in a certain manner this day will interpret based on how you've interpreted before. To interject a different way of perceiving other than that is to cause somewhat a tiny bit of turmoil. In other words, in the old traditional ways of most religious and philosophical backgrounds, get to know yourself a little bit in a balanced manner. Don't beat yourself up. Don't put yourself up. Just see you and what you do. Register how you express. Register the stuff you don't express. And that will help you come up with a different twist or bias, slightly different than was there before. But that originating bias will not want that to happen because it's reflexive. And it has been experiential, whether it was unconscious or conscious, still experiential from a particular way of seeing things. If there is a change in that small area of difference, there's a little space through which energy can begin to be perceived because you are adding something to the mix. And you'll begin to perceive that energy because it's there to be perceived. The mind is in and off the body. The emotions are in and off the body. The physical can perceive things off the body. If you were deaf and an explosion occurred, even a mile away, you might feel the percussion touching you. You have a sensory system all around you that relates to this very large structure, this physical form. And it is a perceiver, and it is the one that is the oldest in you. It starts in the womb. And it's part of the beginning of conscious awareness, even though it is unconscious. One could say it begins there. Don't ask me when it begins exactly then, because I have no idea. I can't remember that far back. Others of you who think you have, you may say, oh, well, it starts there, but look out, because it might be based on your bias. And it's okay. Just know you have it. The trick in all of this is increased perception. Know you have it. Know you think like this. Know you react to that. Know that it's okay to understand you a little bit better than you did before. But also Know that as you begin to perceive energy moving through you or around you, you are learning more about that. And as you are learning, it's not the end game or the end point. It's the learning process. There's a whole sequence and process of learning. And that moves you slowly into the second level of a bond between, a possible bond between higher states and our states here. At first, you will perceive quite physically how you function as a personality. If it's intense, the energy will be intense. All of us have, from time to time, intensity within us that we are involved with. You'll notice it. Soften it down best you can. That's why meditation is really important. Or, as someone said, is a form of prayer okay in that? Yes, if it quietens you down, it is. It really is. If you don't have one, make it up. Be sincere. Your reactions are often sincere, but they're biased. Realize that you repeat them because they are sincere. If they weren't, you wouldn't. But recognize the level of engagement you have with your sincerity. Check your bias. You may not want to be anything other than how you are. That means you have reached the apex of wonderment. None of us on this level might reach that apex. No offense to anybody. It's just a carryover from all of our stuff that we've brought along with us as we engage with life. Learning to laugh a little bit about it might be helpful. It's not perfect, but it might be helpful. One of the things that I would suggest is that when you do engage with and start noticing and perceiving energy flowing, which many of you have, just say, wow, okay, now I have to get used to this. And that would be helpful to your personality. Little steps at a time is always helpful to all of us. I wish everybody well. I think we'll meditate now. It's roughly about almost 10 to. So let's meditate, and I'll get some music. And once again, I wish you all well. We've just come through quite an interesting time, as you probably realize. We've had Easter and Passover and Ramadan all around the same time, which is quite fascinating. So take care of yourselves. Shalom, good job. Shalom, good job. Shalom, good job. Shalom, good job. Sing now. Shalom, good job. Sing now. Shalom, good job. Shalom, good job. Shalom, good job. Now we just begin to do the balancing and grounding. And have a good evening. Good night.